John Wayne's final sit-down with Johnny Carson exposed a secret no one expected. Just weeks before his death, Hollywood's toughest cowboy sat across from Johnny and finally admitted the truth he'd been hiding for 50 years, leaving 15 million viewers absolutely stunned. April 9, 1979. The Tonight Show was preparing for what would become one of the most shocking interviews in television history, though no one in the studio knew it at the time. John Wayne, at 71 years old and visibly weakened from the stomach cancer that would claim his life just 2 months later, had agreed to appear on the show one final time. Wayne had been Johnny's guest 17 times over the years, and their conversations were always compelling. He was known for his straight talk, his refusal to play Hollywood games, and his ability to command respect without even trying. Johnny had always enjoyed interviewing him because Wayne represented everything Americans admired: strength, patriotism, and unwavering masculinity. But this appearance would shatter that image forever. Everyone at NBC knew that Wayne was seriously ill, though the full extent of his condition remained private. Johnny had been briefed by his producers that this would likely be Wayne's final television appearance, and he had spent extra time preparing, wanting to honor the legend while knowing Wayne would never accept pity. What happened that night would force America to reconsider everything they thought they knew about their most iconic tough guy. Because when Wayne finally spoke his truth, it wasn't about his war films or his political controversies. It was about something far more personal. Something that revealed the man behind the myth was nothing like the characters he played. Something that would make every father in America question whether strength and silence were the same thing. If you want to know what secret John Wayne carried for 50 years, keep watching. And tell us in the comments, where are you watching this from right now? John Wayne's relationship with The Tonight Show stretched back to 1962, when Johnny Carson first took over the desk. Over 17 appearances, they had developed something rare in Hollywood: genuine friendship built on mutual respect. Johnny admired Wayne's authenticity, and Wayne appreciated Johnny's intelligence and lack of pretense. Their previous interviews had covered Vietnam, Hollywood liberalism, and American values. Wayne was always candid, never diplomatic. He said what he thought about politics, didn't apologize for his conservative views, and made no attempt to soften his image for modern audiences. That authenticity made him fascinating to watch, even for people who disagreed with him. But by April 1979, everything had changed. Wayne had been diagnosed with stomach cancer in January. The cancer was aggressive, and despite surgery and treatment, doctors had given him 6 months to live. He had already filmed his final movie, The Shootist, knowing he wouldn't live to see another project. His legendary 250-pound frame was gone, replaced by a gaunt appearance that shocked anyone who saw him. He had lost 40 pounds. His voice, once deep and commanding, was now raspy and strained. The studio audience had no idea how sick he truly was. NBC had kept the details private at Wayne's request. He didn't want sympathy. He didn't want people watching out of pity. He wanted to control his own narrative until the very end. Johnny understood this completely. He had been given specific instructions: no softball questions, no tearful tributes, no celebration of your career segments. Wayne wanted a real conversation, not a eulogy. "Treat me like I'm here to promote a movie," Wayne had told the producers, "not like I'm dying." So that's exactly what Johnny planned to do. What neither of them anticipated was how the conversation would evolve. How a simple question about his legacy would lead to the most honest confession Wayne had ever made publicly. How the toughest man in Hollywood would finally admit to the fear he'd carried for 5 decades. A fear that had shaped every decision he'd ever made, both on screen and off. A fear about the one role he could never get right. When John Wayne walked onto the Tonight Show stage that April evening, the reaction was immediate and visceral. The studio audience rose to their feet before Johnny could even introduce him, applauding not just for an entertainer, but for an American icon they sensed they were seeing for the last time. Wayne moved slowly across the stage, his imposing physical presence gone, but his commanding dignity still evident in every step. He was wearing a dark suit and his signature neckerchief, and despite his obvious frailty, he had refused a wheelchair backstage. "I walked on this stage for 20 years, I'll walk on it tonight," he had told the producers. The applause wasn't the usual enthusiastic Tonight Show reception. This was something deeper, more solemn. People were on their feet to honor a man who had defined American masculinity for 50 years, who had fought 200 movie battles, who had become synonymous with courage, determination, and unwavering principles. Johnny stood to greet him, extending his hand, but Wayne pulled him into a brief embrace instead. It was uncharacteristic for both men. Neither was known for public displays of emotion, but viewers could see genuine affection passing between them. "John Wayne," Johnny said, his voice carrying more weight than usual. "Thank you for being here." "Wouldn't miss it, Johnny," Wayne replied, settling into the guest chair with visible effort. His voice was weaker than audiences remembered, but the authority that had made him a star was still there. "Besides, your ratings need the help." The audience laughed, grateful for the familiar Wayne humor that cut through the heaviness in the room. For the first 15 minutes, the interview proceeded as their previous conversations had. Johnny asked Wayne about his westerns, and he told a classic story about John Ford on the set of The Searchers. He was funny, self-deprecating in his particular way, and occasionally profane, vintage Duke. He shared a story about stubborn horses and difficult directors, ending with his trademark drawl. The audience laughed and applauded, but there was something bittersweet underneath every moment. Everyone watching understood they were witnessing the final chapter of a legendary career, and every story carried extra weight. Johnny, demonstrating the sensitivity that made him exceptional, allowed Wayne to control the conversation's pace. He asked questions but didn't push. He laughed at the jokes but didn't treat Wayne like he was fragile. He gave him exactly what he needed, respect and space to be himself. Then, about 20 minutes into the interview, something shifted. The familiar bravado faded, and for the first time in his career, John Wayne let America see the man behind the myth. Stay with us, because what happens next changed how an entire generation understood what it means to be a man. And drop a like if this story is hitting you differently than you expected. Where in the world are you watching from? Johnny had just asked Wayne about his proudest achievement, expecting another entertaining Hollywood anecdote about Oscar wins or box office records. Instead, Wayne grew quiet, his expression changing in a way that made the entire studio audience lean forward. "Johnny," Wayne said, his voice suddenly serious, "can I tell you something I've never admitted publicly?" Johnny's face showed surprise, but he nodded immediately. "Of course, Duke. Whatever you want to share." Wayne looked down at his hands for a moment, a gesture completely unlike the confident man America knew. When he looked back up, his eyes were glistening. "I'm scared," he said simply. "I've been scared my entire life." The studio audience went completely silent. Johnny's professional composure held, but viewers could see the shock register on his face. This was John Wayne, the man who had faced down 100 outlaws on screen, who had stormed 10 beaches, who had never shown fear in 170 films. "I don't mean scared of dying," Wayne continued, his voice steady despite the emotion. "Hell, we're all dying from the moment we're born. I mean scared of being real. Scared of showing people who I actually am instead of who they needed me to be." He paused, collecting himself. "Johnny, I've spent 50 years playing the same character. Strong, silent, unbreakable. The man who always knew what to do, who never questioned himself, who could solve any problem with courage and conviction. That's what America wanted from me, and that's what I gave them." Wayne shifted in his chair, wincing slightly from pain he was trying to hide. "But it wasn't me. It was never me." "What do you mean?" Johnny asked gently, giving him space to continue. "I mean that every role I ever played, every interview I ever gave, every public appearance I ever made, I was performing. I was being the Duke. The icon. The symbol of American strength. Because that's what people needed, especially during World War II and Vietnam. They needed to believe that men like that existed. That courage and determination could solve anything." The raw honesty in his voice was stunning. This wasn't the John Wayne anyone knew. "The real me," Wayne continued. "The real me was a kid from Winterset, Iowa named Marion Morrison who was small and afraid. Who was terrified of not measuring up. Who spent his whole life trying to prove himself because he never felt good enough." Johnny sat forward, fully engaged. "Why are you telling us this now?" Wayne smiled sadly. "Because I'm dying, And I finally realized something. I spent 50 years being strong for everybody else. Being the example. Being the hero. And I never let anyone see that I was just a man trying to figure it out like everybody else. He looked directly at the camera, speaking to millions of Americans watching at home. I played soldiers, cowboys, warriors. I represented strength, honor, unwavering principles. People looked up to me. They wanted to be like the characters I played. And that terrified me, because I knew the truth. He paused, and the weight of what was coming hung in the air like smoke. I knew that while I was teaching America's sons to be tough, I was destroying my own. What John Wayne revealed next would change how America understood masculinity, heroism, and the cost of living up to impossible expectations. The truth is, Wayne said, his voice breaking slightly, I failed at the thing that mattered most. He paused, visibly struggling with emotion. Everyone thinks my greatest achievement was my career. 170 films. An Oscar for True Grit. The biggest star at the box office for 3 decades. America's favorite cowboy. Wayne shook his head slowly. But I want you to know what I actually failed at, Johnny. I failed as a father. Johnny waited, understanding this wasn't a time for questions. I have 7 children, Wayne continued. And I taught them to be strong. To be tough. To never show weakness. I taught them the same lessons I learned playing all those heroes. His voice grew quieter. But I never taught them it was okay to be scared. I never told them it was okay to fail. I never showed them that real strength is being honest about your fears. He wiped his eyes, not caring about the camera capturing his tears. My son Patrick once came to me when he was 12, crying about being bullied at school. And you know what I told him? I said, Waynes, don't cry. You go back tomorrow and you stand up to them. I thought I was making him strong. Wayne's hands were shaking now. But I wasn't making him strong. I was teaching him to hide. To pretend. To be as fake as I was. When did you realize this? Johnny asked softly. 2 years ago, Wayne replied. Patrick came to me and said, Dad, I never felt like I could talk to you. I was always afraid to disappoint you. And I finally understood what I'd done. I'd turned my children into the same kind of performer I'd been for 50 years. The studio audience was completely silent, and across America, millions of viewers were absorbing this confession from a man who had defined their understanding of masculinity. I'm telling you this now, Wayne said, looking directly at the camera again, because I don't want other fathers to make the same mistake I did. Teaching your kids to be tough isn't the same as teaching them to be strong. Real strength is admitting when you're scared. Real courage is being honest about your weaknesses. He turned back to Johnny. I spent my whole career playing men who never showed fear. But the bravest thing I could have done was show my kids that even heroes get scared, get hurt, get things wrong. And that's okay. Wayne took a shaky breath. But I didn't do that. And now I'm running out of time to fix it. Johnny Carson did something he'd never done in 17 years of hosting. He stood up, walked around his desk, and sat beside his guest. Don't go anywhere, because what Johnny says next will break your heart and change how you think about fatherhood forever. If this is hitting home, comment below and subscribe for more untold Hollywood stories. Where are you watching this emotional moment from? Duke, Johnny said quietly, sitting beside him on the couch. I think a lot of fathers in America are hearing themselves in your story right now. Wayne nodded, composing himself. I hope so. Because I want them to understand something I learned too late. He looked directly at the camera once more, speaking with the authority that had commanded audiences for decades, but with a vulnerability he'd never shown before. Being a man isn't about never showing fear. It's about being honest with yourself and the people who love you. It's about admitting when you're wrong. It's about telling your kids the truth, that you don't have all the answers, that you're scared sometimes, that you fail sometimes. His voice grew stronger. I played heroes who never questioned themselves, who always knew what was right, who could fix everything with courage and determination. But that's not real life. Real life is messy. Real life is uncertain. And real men admit that. Johnny asked, what would you tell fathers watching right now? I'd tell them to stop performing, Wayne said immediately. Stop being who you think you should be and start being who you actually are. Your kids don't need a hero. They need a father. They need someone real. He paused, emotion evident. Tell your kids you're scared sometimes. Tell them you make mistakes. Show them that strength isn't about being invincible, it's about being honest. Wayne looked at Johnny. I spent 50 years being the Duke. Playing the role America needed me to play. But I should have spent that time being Marion Morrison, flawed, scared, real. Because that's what my family needed. Is it too late? Johnny asked gently. For me? Maybe, Wayne admitted. But not for the fathers watching tonight. They still have time. And I'm begging them not to waste it the way I did. What happened next was spontaneous and beautiful. Johnny reached over and took Wayne's hand, two men who had spent careers avoiding vulnerability, finally being honest. Thank you for this, Johnny said. Thank you for showing us what real courage looks like. As the interview concluded, Johnny walked Wayne off stage, holding his arm to steady him. At the last moment, before disappearing from view, Wayne turned back to the camera and said, "Be honest with your kids. They'll forgive everything else." The response was unprecedented. NBC's switchboard was overwhelmed with calls from fathers, sons, and families. Letters poured in by the thousands. Mental health professionals praised the interview for its honest discussion of masculinity, vulnerability, and fatherhood. John Wayne died on June 11, 1979, just 2 months after his final Tonight Show appearance. Johnny Carson spoke at his memorial service. Duke gave me many great interviews, Johnny said in his eulogy. But that last one was different. He wasn't performing. He was finally being real. And in doing that, he gave us permission to be real too. Today, the interview is studied in psychology courses about emotional honesty. It's shown in parenting classes as an example of what happens when we confuse strength with silence. Film students watch it alongside Wayne's greatest westerns and see something remarkable. His final performance wasn't playing a hero. It was stopping the performance entirely and showing America that the real John Wayne was braver than any character he'd ever played, because he admitted he was human. If this story moved you, subscribe for more untold Hollywood truths. Share this with a father who needs to hear it. Drop a comment telling us where you're watching from. And remember John Wayne's final message: real strength is being honest about your weakness. Your kids don't need a hero, they need you, real and honest.